There are so many different subcategories of the ketogenic diet nowadays, but what I'm going to focus on in this video is just the 5 main forms of the ketogenic diet. Now, if you want to get down to really the nitty-gritty, the ketogenic diet is just the ketogenic diet. Now, all these different subcategories I'm going to talk about are just various forms that people have really kind of changed or altered to fit their specific lifestyles. And as the ketogenic lifestyle tends to evolve and more people do it, I think we'll see more and more of these different forms. So the first one we have to talk about is the basic standard ketogenic diet. This is traditionally a 75% intake of fat, 20% intake of protein, and 5% intake of carbohydrates. Now, there's a lot of evidence that shows that a traditional standard ketogenic diet is phenomenal. And the main study that I would like to reference in terms of the longevity piece is going to be the Virta 2-Year Health Study, because it took a look at subjects that have been doing keto for 2 years. And the biggest piece here with a traditional standard ketogenic diet is there was a 74% adherence rate over the course of 2 years. That is earth-shattering. That is so amazing because that is such a high adherence. So this is sort of your foundational ketogenic diet with this macronutrient breakdown. Great for all kinds of things, ranging from modulating inflammation, gut health, brain health, all kinds of different things. But most of all, modulating the glucose levels and reducing weight. This is the standard. The next form of the ketogenic diet is going to be the therapeutic ketogenic diet, and this is 90% fat, 10% protein, and less than 1% carbohydrate. This is used for therapeutic conditions, neurological conditions, epilepsy, things like that. And the goal here is to get your ketones really high, above 3 millimoles, because we have seen in patient populations with neurological conditions that higher levels of ketones tend to improve symptoms. A lot of the reasoning behind why isn't known. We do know that ketones burn cleaner, so that could have something to do with the fact that it's less stress on the brain for people that have these neurological conditions. Anyhow, the point is to get the ketones higher. We want to get them high, especially with therapeutic ketosis. That's where Keto-Mojo comes in handy, because if you are measuring your ketones, you want to make sure you're doing so accurately and not using urine strips. You want to be using blood ketone testing that tests beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the primary ketone body that we want to look at. So it needs to be over 3 millimoles if you're doing therapeutic ketogenic dieting. Anyhow, then we move into one of my personal favorites, which is cyclical ketogenic dieting. This is where you have periods of time where you cycle out of ketosis to keep your body somewhat adapted to utilizing glucose as a fuel source. Now, this isn't for the everyday person. This is for someone that is a little bit more of an extreme athlete, perhaps a football player, someone that's doing a lot of anaerobic activity and needs to still be able to make sure they're adequately fueled with glucose. Now, I will say, as you do the ketogenic diet for a longer period of time, your body finds ways to create glucose from proteins, from fat, from other breakdowns. It just does. But if you're concerned with this and you do need an extra bolus of carbohydrates for whatever explosive reason, then cyclical ketogenic dieting is great. Okay, that's where you do something like 3 or 4 days on ketosis, 1 day off. 3 or 4 days back on, 1 day off. Or the other form is where you go for 2 or 3 months at a time ketogenic dieting and then take 2 weeks off. Now, they all come with their pros and cons. The pros being, yes, you do become somewhat more glucose adapted and less risk of glucose intolerance, but the cons are, just like learning a language, your body isn't as efficient at utilizing those ketones as it would be if you were to just dive in full bore. But once again, that's where measuring comes in handy, because if you are doing a cyclical ketogenic diet, you want to frame it in such a way that once you do have your carbohydrates, you get back into ketosis as quick as possible, and you're going to be able to identify that with your meter. Okay, then we go targeted ketogenic dieting, which is very similar to cyclical ketogenic dieting, except you're adding carbohydrates only at the end of a workout. And quite frankly, that's the best time to do it anyway, because you're likely already kicked out of ketosis. At the end of a workout, you're going to be out of ketosis because your body upregulates glucose utilization at that point. Working out just drives down ketones because it burns them up, and it drives up glucose because there's a demand. So what that means at the end of a workout, if you measure your ketones, you might find you're out of ketosis. So you might as well, if you're going to have carbohydrates, have a little bit at that point in time. This is called targeted keto because it's very targeted with your time frame when you have your carbs. Then the last one I want to talk about is true zero carb or carnivore, which is really gaining a lot of popularity right now, and more so than the macronutrient breakdown of it being, pretty much 50% protein, 50% fat, and 0% carbohydrates. More importantly than that is it's an elimination protocol. So people feel really good because they're eliminating foods that could be inflammatory to them. In the world of so many processed foods and so many different varieties and foods from all corners of the world, it's hard for us to identify what we really resonate with as far as of food from the digestive system and the metabolism standpoint. So if you reduce all those risks and you go back to basic meat, you're not going to have those issues. So people end up having a lot of success with that. But once again, we see ketone levels all over the place, depending on how much protein people have, et cetera, et cetera. So that's again where the Keto-Mojo meter comes in handy, because it helps you out with that, helps you identify what your perfect macronutrient ratio should be. And I hope that you understand the whole premise of this video is to show that although there are different macronutrient ratios, and although there are different profiles, at the end of the day, it all comes down to how you feel, your bio-individuality, and being able to test with the gold standard, the Keto-Mojo meter. So as always, keep it locked in here with Keto-Mojo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.